your weapons. You will not need them.
Oh, you got some?
Get it!
Give me a target.
Hey folks, thank you for joining me again. We're jumping right back into Jedi Survivor. We're going to give it a shot again on the Intel i7-7700 with the AMD Radeon RX 6400. If you want, you can go back and take a look at the original video. I have a little bit more of my initial impressions on how it plays on this system, but now that a few patches have come out, I've noticed a few things. So I decided to come back and try it again. And what I found is that it does play better in certain areas. However, it plays worse in others. So initially, what you can see is that, yes, it is playing at a higher FPS, at the same exact settings that we were running before. We are looking again at 1920 by 1080, running at ultra performance on FSR2, low settings across the board. We have everything set to make this as best an experience as we possibly can get in terms of frames per second. This is not a very powerful system. In fact, it is below the minimum spec recommendations that come from EA for this particular game, especially the GPU. So yeah, let's take a look at their specs really quick. Right off the bat, I think it's a typo. They have 8 gigabits of RAM instead of gigabytes. RAM is usually measured in gigabytes. Gigabytes is about 8 times the amount of bytes that gigabits would have, bit versus byte kind of thing. So that's kind of hopefully a typo on their end, but whatever, we'll just assume they mean 8 gigabytes. I've got 16 gigabytes in my system, so let's cross that off and add that in for a comparison here. Going on down the line, we'll skip the CPU features, CPU AMD there, jump down to GPU AMD. They recommend a Radeon RX 580. In this particular system that we are testing on, we have a 6400, which actually has less VRAM. It is a newer card though, so it does have some of the newer features, but in terms of raw performance, it just does not hold a candle to the 580. And a lot of that has to do with that it's a low profile GPU. The 6400 is a low profile GPU that does not actually draw power outside of what is supplied by the PCIe. Looking on further down the line, we got plenty of storage on this particular system. Again, 155 gigabits, that's okay. CPU alternate, that's what we're actually running in this system, an Intel Core i7-7700. And yeah, so we are actually slightly below minimum system requirements when it comes to the GPU, and that's really where you'll be impressed by what you kind of see here. However, because of the lack of VRAM in this particular card, I think we're running into some issues. I'm not sure. I really don't know too much about the technical aspects of things, but what you'll see, especially as I kind of show you some of the video here, as I let the game run longer, as I play for a longer period of time, performance gets markedly worse. And what usually has to happen is I have to shut down, completely exit out of the game, and then come back into it, and then we jump right back up to a higher frames per second. And I'll actually show you that right now. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of the first little boss battles here. I'm trying not to spoil too much. This footage is all from the first hour to hour and a half of the game. We are going to be taking a look at what's going on here. Really take a look at how the frames per second change when we reset here. And so now we're going to go ahead and jump in and take a look at the second planet you get to. And I'm not going to spoil too much here. I'm going to try and keep it pretty vague in what's going on. But what you can see here is that, yeah, we do actually have some pretty good FPS in certain areas, but then you see some significant dips as you kind of traverse the open world. And that is something that you actually do see on higher end systems. Even on my high-end gaming system that I have downstairs with the 4080 in it, we still see dips in this area. Now, having said that, I do believe that I may have been able to improve this by, again, shutting down the game, restarting it, getting back into the open world here. What you will find is, I think that this card can play this game. It is entirely playable. but you do have to have that in mind, that your sessions are going to be relatively short. You're going to notice some drops, especially when you get to certain cutscenes, kind of like what we have right here. But when you're actually in the game and playing, it's not terrible. Yes, you're playing at the lowest possible spec. Yes, you have FSR2 Ultra Performance on. Ultra! Just to make it as muddy and potato looking as possible. But it is playable. So, if you have a system that is at minimum spec, that you actually have an RX 580 with a little bit more VRAM, or even a slightly more powerful GPU, you probably will have a better experience with this. I would also recommend looking at upgrading a CPU if you're at the min spec, because CPU limitation seems to be one of the big issues with this game. The patches have improved that significantly. We still see some stutter, but overall, I think those are the two areas, which are the key areas, that you need to improve performance on this particular game, is looking at your CPU and your GPU. You don't have to go too much higher if you want to keep it at 1080p. Overall, I really enjoy this game, and I would highly recommend it. The gameplay itself is actually quite good. The story so far has been fantastic. I really do enjoy this game, and even on these low-end settings where things kind of look a little mushy, it is still a good-looking game. It's not terrible. I mean, I've seen better games on this particular system, things that are way better optimized, that are way better artistically designed to handle lower-end systems. But this is not the worst. So give it a shot if you want. Maybe wait for a sale. Who knows? There's probably more patches coming down the line, and we will see better performance coming out of this. I think the VRAM limitation is going to be the big issue if you do try to run this with something that is below the minimum specs, like we have in this particular system. But hey, you know what? Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, throw a like. If you want to subscribe, that would be great too. It helps out the channel. If you have anything that you want to see changed, or hey, you want to look at something a little bit different, let me know in the comments. I have this system running pretty much full time now, and we can throw some other games on there and just see how they perform. I think I might try something out with Last of Us, or maybe even Red Dead Redemption 2. Who knows? We'll try and play around with it. So again, thank you for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next video.